The baby screamed through the wedding, and then the maid of honor broke every rule. But what if the most dangerous moment of your life arrived, disguised as someone else's cry? Rain hammered the stained glass windows of a Savannah chapel as Claire Bennett stood beside the altar, smiling through a grief no one could see. 4 months earlier, she had left a hospital with empty arms. Now at the back of the church, a terrified infant was crying in the arms of Julian Cross, a man powerful enough to silence an entire room, but helpless against his own daughter's pain. What Claire did next would bind 3 wounded lives together and pull her into a world of loyalty, danger, and forbidden love. Stay with this story because it is not only about romance. It is about grief, trust, and the courage to choose life again. Like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The cry that stopped the wedding did not fade when the chapel doors closed. It followed Claire Bennett into the reception hall even after baby Nora had fallen asleep against her chest. Music drifted beneath the chandeliers. Champagne moved from hand to hand. Guests smiled too brightly, pretending they had not watched Julian Cross, the most feared man on the Georgia coast, stand, helpless beside a stranger in a blue dress. Claire felt every stare. Nora slept with one warm cheek pressed over Claire's heart. Her tiny fingers clutched the fabric near Claire's collarbone, as if sleep itself could not persuade her to let go. Julian walked beside them without touching Claire or asking for his daughter back. He simply stayed close, watching each breath Nora took. That frightened Claire more than his reputation did. Rachel found them near the ballroom entrance. Her veil had slipped loose from her dark hair, and concern had replaced the glow she had worn at the altar. What happened in there? Claire shifted Nora higher against her shoulder. She was hungry. Rachel studied her face. That is not all. The music swelled behind them. Someone laughed near the bar. The ordinary sounds of celebration pressed against the strange little circle they had formed. Claire lowered her voice. My body still makes milk. Rachel's expression changed instantly. Claire. Not here. Rachel looked down at Nora. Did holding her help you, or did it tear you apart? Both. Rachel touched Claire's arm. You walked away from my ceremony, took a stranger's child, and locked yourself in a side room with a man half this city is afraid to name. I know. I am not angry. I am terrified for you. Julian's voice came from behind them. She will not be harmed. Rachel turned. You cannot promise that. Julian held her gaze. No, I can promise that anyone who tries will regret it. Daniel, Rachel's new husband, stepped closer. My wife is asking whether Claire is safe with you, not whether you can punish someone afterward. Julian went still. Then Nora made a small sound in her sleep. The anger disappeared from his face. She will be safe, he said again, and this time it sounded less like a threat than a plea. Daniel drew Claire aside. You know his name, he said. That is not the same as knowing him. I know enough. The Cross family owns shipping companies, construction firms, security contracts, and half the warehouses along the river. The legal businesses are real. So are the others. Allegedly. That word keeps men out of prison. It does not make them innocent. Claire glanced toward Julian. He stood beneath the chandelier with his hands in his pockets, surrounded by people who pretended not to watch him. Daniel lowered his voice. With men like him, help becomes obligation. Obligation becomes loyalty. Loyalty becomes something you do not get to leave. Nora stirred. Julian heard it before Claire did. He crossed the room, stopped in front of her, and said one word. Please. Not an order, not a demand. Claire looked at Rachel. Take care of the baby, Rachel said. But we talk before you go anywhere. Claire carried Nora into a private sitting room beside the ballroom. Julian followed and closed the door. The room smelled of old wood roses and rain. Claire sat near the window. She tried rocking Nora and offered the bottle the nanny had prepared. Nora turned away and cried harder. Julian paced once across the carpet. "You are making her nervous," Claire said. "I am standing. You are standing like someone is about to be executed." His eyes narrowed, but he sat. Claire covered Nora with a folded shawl and fed her. The crying stopped. Nora's fists slowly opened. Julian leaned forward. "How long will she need that I do not know? You said she was grieving." I said grief and broken attachment may be part of the problem. That is not a diagnosis. You knew what she needed. For one moment. Claire looked down at Nora. "This cannot become the only way she eats. She needs a medical evaluation. Someone must check her weight, hydration, swallowing, reflux, and allergies. I have taken her to doctors. Then take her again." His jaw tightened. "You think I did not try? No. I think you tried to solve the problem the way you solve everything else." "And how is that?" "You hired people." The words landed hard. "How many nannies?" "6. In 8 months, Julian looked toward the window. "I hired the best." She did not have enough time to trust them. "You are saying this is my fault?" "I am saying every time someone left, Nora learned that comfort disappears." He stared at the floor. "What should I have done? You should have been part of the plan. I am her father. That is not the same as being the person she expects to come when she cries." Silence filled the room. Claire softened her voice. For months, Nora heard Elena's heartbeat. She knew the rhythm of her breathing, the way she moved, the sound of her voice. Then she entered the world, and all of it was gone. "She never even held her," Julian said. "Neither did I." His head lifted. Claire wished the words back, but they were already between them. "The child you lost." Claire looked toward the rain. Her name was Lucy. "How long ago?" 4 months. Julian waited. Claire had learned that most people rushed to fill silence around grief. They offered comforting phrases. They said she could have another child. Julian said nothing. So she continued. "Lucy was born too early. There was an emergency. I was unconscious. When I woke up, she was gone. A nurse stood beside my bed and would not look at me. You did not see her. Not alive." Julian lowered his head. "You should have been allowed to say goodbye." Claire's breath caught. No one had said that before. They had told her the hospital followed procedure. They had told her to be grateful she survived. No one had named the cruelty of waking to empty arms. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away. Nora finished feeding and fell asleep. Julian stood. "Come home with us tonight." Claire gave a disbelieving laugh. "That is not a normal sentence. Nothing about tonight is normal. You do not know me. I know my daughter has eaten more in the last hour than she ate all day. That does not make me safe." "No," he said. "It makes you necessary." Claire's spine stiffened. "I am not something you can acquire. I did not mean it that way. Men like you usually do. You know nothing about men like me. I know enough to be careful. Then be careful in my home." Claire shook her head. "I have a home. You also have a child in your arms who will wake hungry before midnight. She is your child." His voice dropped. "I know." The pain in those words stopped her anger. "I know Elena died bringing her into the world. I know I have spent 8 months failing to understand what she needs." He met Claire's eyes. "I am asking for help." The feared man from the chapel was gone. In his place stood an exhausted father with rain drying on his shoulders. Claire hated that she understood him. She hated that Nora's weight against her chest felt like breath returning after months underwater. "One night," she said. Julian nodded. "One night." Rachel insisted on accompanying Claire to her apartment. Julian's driver followed them through wet Savannah streets. Live oaks bent beneath the storm and streetlights shone across the pavement. Nora sat secured between Claire and Rachel, watching the passing lights with solemn dark eyes. "You can still change your mind," Rachel said. "I know. You have spent 4 months refusing to enter Lucy's nursery. Tonight you are going to sleep in a stranger's home beside another woman's baby." I heard her cry. "Rachel." So did everyone. "No. I heard it here." Claire pressed a hand to her chest. It was like every part of me that had been useless after Lucy died suddenly had a reason to exist. "You were never useless. That is not how it felt." Claire's apartment sat on the 3rd floor of an old brick building near Forsyth Park. The rooms were small and warm, filled with books, certificates, and plants Rachel had kept alive when Claire stopped noticing them. At the end of the hallway stood a closed white door. Julian saw it when he entered. Neither of them spoke. Claire placed Nora in a portable bassinet Rachel had once bought for Lucy, then hidden after the funeral. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. "You do not have to use that," Rachel whispered. "Yes, I do." Nora slept for less than a minute before crying again. Claire walked, rocked, and offered a bottle. Nora pushed it away. "This cannot be the answer every time," Claire said. "Tonight it can," Julian replied. Claire carried Nora into her bedroom and closed the door. When she returned 20 minutes later, the baby was asleep. Julian stood near a shelf with a framed ultrasound photograph in his hand. Claire had kept it face down for months. Lucy Bennett was written beneath the image. Julian placed the frame upright. "I did not mean to intrude." "You already have." He accepted that without argument. Claire began packing clothes, toiletries, her laptop, and Lucy's photograph. "Before I go anywhere with you, there are conditions." Julian nodded. "Nora sees her pediatrician in the morning. A certified lactation consultant evaluates this. I keep working. I do not accept money designed to make leaving difficult. You expect me not to pay you. I expect fair compensation in a written contract prepared by an attorney who does not work for you." Respect flickered in his eyes. "Continue. Rachel gets your address. She gets daily check-ins. I can leave whenever I choose. No cameras in my bedroom or office. You do not monitor my phone, contact my clients, or use your men to solve problems I have not asked you to solve." Julian's expression became unreadable. "No one gives me rules in my own home." Claire zipped her bag. "Then find another woman." Nora stirred in the bassinet. The adults froze until she settled. Julian looked at Claire for a long moment. 14 days. All your conditions. And you participate." His brow furrowed. "You do not hand Nora to me and disappear into meetings. You learn her routines. You hold her when she cries. The goal is not to make me the only person she trusts. I do not know how. Then learn." He looked toward his daughter. 14 days, he said. Rachel stepped forward. "If she calls me and says she wants to leave, I come get her. Yes, you do not stop me." "No." Rachel watched Julian write the penthouse address on the back of his card. She entered it into her phone, photographed the card, and sent the image to Daniel. Julian noticed. Rachel lifted her chin. "Problem number 1. I am also sharing Claire's location with Daniel. That is sensible." His answer unsettled Rachel more than resistance might have. At the building entrance, Julian opened the rear door of the sedan, but Claire did not move. "If I get inside," she said, "I keep my own phone, my own keys, and my own way out." Julian reached into his coat and handed her a black access card. "This opens the private elevator and the garage exit. A car will be available whenever you ask." Claire did not take it immediately. "Whenever I ask or whenever you approve?" His gaze held hers. "Whenever you ask." She accepted the card. Rachel embraced Claire tightly, careful of Nora between them. "Morning and night," she whispered. Claire nodded. As the sedan pulled away, Rachel remained beneath the street lamp, growing smaller through the rain. Claire watched until she disappeared from view. For the first time, the decision felt real. She was not only helping a hungry child. She was crossing into a life guarded by locked elevators, armed men, and promises that had never been tested. The next morning, Nora's pediatrician examined her in a private clinic near the river. Dr. Evelyn Porter reviewed Nora's chart, weighed her, checked her hydration, and watched her refuse a bottle. Nora began to cry. Dr. Porter did not call her difficult. "This child is exhausted." Julian stood beside the examination table. "How serious?" "She is underweight and mildly dehydrated. Her development is delayed, though not beyond recovery." A lactation consultant named Marissa joined them. She discussed screening pumping supplementation bottles and solid food. Then she looked at Julian. "Nora must learn that comfort comes from her father, too. Claire may help stabilize her, but she cannot become the only safe person in Nora's world." Julian glanced at Claire. She did not rescue him from the truth. Marissa asked Julian to try feeding Nora, while Claire remained across the room. Nora rejected the bottle and turned toward Claire. Julian's shoulders tightened. Marissa said, "Do not treat refusal as rejection." Julian looked down at his daughter. "What is the difference? She is telling you that she is frightened. She is not telling you that she does not want you." He adjusted his hold and tried again. Nora still refused, but her crying eased when he spoke. Dr. Porter wrote down a schedule for weight checks and warned that improvement would be measured in ounces sleep patterns and trust not miracles. Julian folded the paper and placed it inside his wallet with the care of a legal document. Claire noticed. For a man accustomed to issuing orders, he was beginning to understand that his daughter could not be commanded into feeling safe. By noon, they arrived at his penthouse. The private elevator opened into glass marble and silence. The Savannah River stretched beyond enormous windows, cargo ships moving below through gray water. 2 security guards stood near the entrance. Marcus Bell introduced himself with a measured nod. He was broad-shouldered gray at the temples and watchful. "Ms. Bennett." "Claire." His eyes moved to Nora. "She has not been this quiet in months. Quiet is not the same as secure." Marcus studied her, then nodded once. Julian led Claire down a long hallway. Her room had been prepared beside Nora's nursery with fresh linens, a desk, a rocking chair, and a lock on the inside. Claire checked the ceiling vents, smoke detector, and lamp. Julian watched from the doorway. Satisfied? No. Something almost like amusement touched his mouth. Good. The nursery was beautiful and lifeless. Untouched toys lined white shelves. Expensive blankets were folded by color. 6 kinds of bottles sat beside a sterilizer. Inside the closet, Claire found schedules taped to the door. 6 names, 6 sets of handwriting. She woke up to a different person every few weeks. I hired replacements when they quit. She did not understand that. What was I supposed to tell an 8-month-old? You were supposed to be the person who stayed. Julian went silent. Claire regretted the cruelty of the sentence, but not its truth. Nora began to fuss. Julian reached for her, then hesitated. "Take off your jacket," Claire said. He stared at her. "Loosen your shirt." Marcus, standing near the hall, looked away. Julian obeyed. Claire guided Nora against his chest. The baby stiffened and cried. Julian's arms tightened. "She wants you. She wants what she already knows. Do not disappear because she is angry." Nora cried harder. Julian tried to hand her back. Claire stepped away. "Stay." His eyes flashed, but he looked down at his daughter. "I am here," he said. Nora cried. He repeated it. "I am here." Minutes passed. The sound softened. Nora did not sleep or smile, but she stopped fighting his chest. Julian stood perfectly still, afraid that any movement would break the fragile truce. That night, Claire woke just after 2. Nora was crying. She crossed the hall and found the nursery door open. Julian stood beside the window with Nora against his chest. His shirt was open at the collar, his hair had fallen across his forehead. He moved slowly through the dark room. "I am here," he whispered. Again and again. Claire remained in the hallway. After several minutes, Nora's cries weakened. Her cheek settled against Julian. One small hand curled near his heart. Julian closed his eyes. "You breathe like your mother," he whispered. Claire stepped back before he could see her. In the morning, she found him in the kitchen making coffee. His suit was perfect again. Only the exhaustion remained. He handed her a cup. "She stayed with me for 7 minutes." Claire took the coffee. "That is 7 minutes longer than yesterday." Julian looked toward the nursery, then back at Claire. Something had shifted between them overnight. Not trust, not yet, but the first narrow place where trust might fit. The narrow place where trust might fit did not open all at once. It widened by inches, measured in bottles warmed before sunrise, whispered reassurances in the dark, and the number of seconds Nora could remain in Julian's arms before reaching for Claire. By the 4th morning, Claire woke to the smell of coffee and found Julian standing in the kitchen with Nora strapped against his chest. He wore black trousers and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. His tie lay abandoned on the counter beside an open laptop. Nora rested inside a soft carrier, watching the room with serious eyes, while Julian attempted to pour coffee without waking her fully. Claire stopped in the doorway. "You figured out the carrier?" Marcus watched a video. Marcus. Julian looked toward the hall. He refused to demonstrate. A quiet laugh escaped Claire before she could stop it. Julian looked at her. It was the first time he had heard that sound. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Nora recognized Claire and began pushing against the carrier. Julian's face tightened with disappointment. Claire approached slowly. "Do not assume she wants to leave you. She is trying to climb out. She sees the person who usually feeds her. That sounds remarkably similar to wanting to leave me." Claire placed one hand against Nora's back, but did not remove her. "Good morning, sweetheart." Nora reached toward Claire, then looked back at Julian when he spoke her name. The movement was small. Julian noticed. "So now what? You keep holding her while I make breakfast. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Then your meeting can watch you hold your daughter. They will find that distracting. Good." Julian's mouth moved, almost forming a smile. He carried Nora toward the dining table, opened his laptop, and connected to a video call. 4 men appeared on the screen. Their conversation stopped when they saw the baby against his chest. Julian sat down. "Continue." A man with silver hair cleared his throat and began discussing shipping numbers. Nora grabbed Julian's collar. He gently removed her fingers without looking away from the screen. Claire stood at the kitchen counter slicing fruit, trying not to watch. The meeting continued in calm, precise voices. Julian asked questions about contracts, warehouse repairs, and a delayed shipment from Miami. Every few seconds, his hand moved over Nora's back with unconscious rhythm. When she began to fuss, he glanced toward Claire. Claire shook her head. Julian looked down. "I am here," he said quietly. The men on the screen pretended not to hear. Nora settled. The apartment had begun to change around them. A folded blanket appeared on the leather sofa. Bottles dried beside expensive glassware. Soft toys migrated across the marble floor. A yellow cloth book rested on top of a stack of financial reports. The penthouse still belonged to Julian, but it no longer looked untouched. It looked lived in. Claire established a schedule that did not depend entirely on her. Julian handled the first diaper change each morning. Claire fed Nora afterward. They both sat on the nursery floor during playtime. Julian returned home before bedtime whenever possible. Some evenings he arrived late and found Nora already asleep. On those nights, he stood beside the crib longer than necessary, watching her breathe. Claire never interrupted him. Nora gained 6 ounces in the first week. Dr. Porter called the progress encouraging but warned them not to rush. Claire kept detailed notes. She recorded how long Nora slept, how much she drank, which textures she accepted, and how she reacted to separation. Julian read every page. He treated the notebook like a briefing from one of his senior advisors. "What does this mean?" he asked one afternoon, pointing to Claire's note about increased eye contact. "It means she is spending less energy protecting herself." "From us?" "From uncertainty." Julian sat beside Nora on the carpet. She was attempting to reach a wooden ring placed just beyond her fingers. "She watches every door." "So do you." He looked at Claire. "Maybe she learned it from me. Maybe you both learned it from losing someone." Nora stretched forward, caught the ring, and rolled onto her back. Julian applauded softly. Nora stared at him, startled. Then she smiled. It lasted less than a second. Julian froze. Did she smile at me? Claire pretended to consider it. She may have been experiencing gas. His expression darkened. Claire laughed again. Nora made a small sound that resembled a laugh of her own. Julian looked between them. "I am being mocked in my own home. You will survive. I have survived less humiliating situations." Claire did not ask what he meant. There were still doors in Julian's life she had no intention of opening. For now, the nursery was enough. Claire continued seeing clients through video calls. Julian had converted a quiet guest room into a temporary office, adding soundproof panels and a locking cabinet for confidential records. He had arranged everything without asking. Claire made him remove the camera above the hallway outside the room. "It is part of the security system," he said. "It points directly at the office door. It does not record sound. It records who enters and when." Julian studied her face, then called Marcus. The camera was removed before her first appointment. Claire noticed that Julian did not argue after she explained why it mattered. He was learning that giving her privacy was not the same as losing control. One afternoon, Claire met with a 16-year-old boy whose father had died in a construction accident. The boy sat before his screen with his hood pulled low over his face. "My mother keeps saying he would want me to be happy," he said. "How does she know?" "She does not," Claire replied. "Then why do people say things like that? Because silence makes them uncomfortable." The boy looked up. Claire continued. "You do not have to turn your grief into something beautiful. You do not have to become stronger because someone died. You only have to keep living long enough to discover what the loss becomes inside you. What if it becomes everything? Then we make room for something beside it." After the session ended, Claire remained at her desk. Her own words lingered in the quiet room. Make room for something beside it. She stared at Lucy's ultrasound photograph now placed near her laptop. A soft knock came at the door. Julian stood outside holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you were in a meeting." It ended. He set 1 cup near her hand. Claire closed the laptop. "How much did you hear?" "Only the end. That is still too much. I did not listen intentionally." "You built the office beside the hall you use all day." Julian nodded. "I can move my meetings downstairs." Claire expected resistance. Instead, he waited for her answer. That would help. He looked at Lucy's photograph. "Do you believe what you told him?" Claire leaned back. "I believe it when I say it to someone else. And when you say it to yourself, I do not." Julian sat across from her. "Why?" "Because I am supposed to know how grief works. Knowing how a wound works does not stop it from hurting." Claire looked at him. That sounded almost therapeutic. "Do not insult me." She smiled into her coffee. The moment remained light until a cry came through the monitor. Both of them stood at once. By the 10th day, Nora had begun accepting small amounts of pumped milk from Julian. The first time she drank 2 full ounces from a bottle in his arms, Julian looked more relieved than he had after receiving news that a major contract had been secured. Claire sat across the room to avoid distracting Nora. Julian whispered encouragement between each swallow. When the bottle was empty, he lifted Nora carefully against his shoulder. She released a loud burp. Julian blinked. Claire covered her mouth. "Is that normal?" "Yes." That sound came from a person who weighs 14 pounds. She is very talented. Nora rested her head against him. Julian looked at Claire over the baby's shoulder. For one dangerous second, the room felt too intimate. Not because of touch, because of recognition. They were beginning to understand each other without speaking. Claire broke eye contact first. That night, Nora developed a fever. It began with flushed cheeks and unusual sleepiness. By midnight, her temperature had risen enough for Dr. Porter to tell them to bring her to the hospital. Julian drove. Marcus followed in another car. Claire sat in the back seat beside Nora, pressing 2 fingers against the baby's wrist as though she could hold the pulse in place. "She is breathing," Julian said from the front. "I know. You checked 10 seconds ago." "I know." At the emergency entrance, a nurse took Nora from the car seat and placed her on a small hospital bed. The corridor smelled of disinfectant. Machines sounded from behind closed doors. A bright ceiling light passed above Claire. The hospital disappeared. For one terrible moment, she was lying on another bed beneath another ceiling. Someone was cutting away her clothes. A nurse was telling her to count backward. She was asking where Lucy was. No one answered. Claire stopped walking. Her lungs refused to expand. Julian noticed after several steps. He turned. Claire stood against the wall with both hands pressed over her mouth. "Claire." She could not answer. He approached but did not touch her. "Nora is alive." Claire looked toward the examination room. A curtain closed behind the nurse. "Nora is alive," Julian repeated. "They are treating her." Claire shook her head. "I cannot hear her. You are not back there." "I cannot hear her." Julian moved in front of her, blocking the corridor. "Look at me." She forced her eyes upward. His face was steady. "Nora is alive. You came here in a car. You walked through the door. You are awake. No one is taking her away without speaking to us." Claire gripped his sleeve. "They did not let me hold Lucy." "I know. They kept saying procedure. I know. I should have fought them. You were unconscious. I should have known something was wrong." "Claire," his voice sharpened enough to reach her. "You were unconscious." She stared at him. "You did not abandon her." The words broke through. Claire inhaled. Then again. Julian remained in front of her until the walls returned to the present. Dr. Porter emerged 20 minutes later. Nora had a common viral infection. Her lungs were clear. Her hydration was stable. She would need monitoring rest and medicine for the fever. Claire asked the same questions twice. Dr. Porter answered both times. When they entered the room, Nora was awake and angry, kicking against the blanket. The sight of her crying brought Claire relief so powerful that she nearly laughed. Julian lifted Nora first. Claire let him. He held his daughter close while Dr. Porter reviewed the instructions. Back at the penthouse, Nora slept between them on the sofa. Julian sat at one end. Claire sat at the other with her feet tucked beneath her. Neither wanted to move her to the crib. "You knew what was happening to me," Claire said. "I recognized it. From yourself." Julian looked down at Nora. "After Elena died, I could not enter the hospital parking garage. I would drive around the block until I found another entrance." Claire studied him. "You never told me that. You never asked. I should not have to interrogate you to learn you are human." His gaze shifted to her. "Most people find it useful to believe I am not." Claire looked at the dark windows. Lucy's father used to tell me I imagined problems. Julian remained still. Claire had not intended to speak about Mason. The hospital had opened too many locked rooms inside her. He said I was dramatic. That pregnancy made me irrational. What problems? My doctor wanted me to rest. Mason said I was using the pregnancy to avoid work. He controlled our money. He checked my phone. When Rachel came over, he found reasons to stay in the room. Julian's hand tightened on the arm of the sofa. Claire noticed. Do not. I have not said anything. You are thinking it. What am I thinking? That you can make him disappear? Julian's face became blank. Can I? Claire stood so quickly that Nora stirred. Do not turn this into one of your problems. He hurt you. That does not give you ownership of the response. I did not say it did. You did not need to. Julian rose. His voice remained quiet. If a man harmed Elena, I would have ended him. I am not Elena. No. And I am not asking you to avenge me. What are you asking? Claire looked directly at him. To hear no. The room went silent. Julian glanced toward Nora, then back at Claire. I will not contact him. You promise? Yes. You will not ask Marcus to investigate him. Julian hesitated. Claire's expression hardened. He said, I promise. She believed the promise cost him something. That mattered more than obedience given easily. Nora recovered within 2 days. The fever broke at dawn while she slept against Julian's chest. Claire found them in the nursery chair. Julian had fallen asleep with one arm around Nora and the other hanging toward the floor. Claire placed a blanket over both of them. Julian opened his eyes. She is cooler. Claire checked Nora's forehead. Yes. Relief moved across his face. He looked at the baby, then at Claire. I did not think fear could become ordinary. It does. How do people live like this badly at first? And later, Claire adjusted the blanket. They learn that fear is not always a warning. Sometimes it is the price of caring. Julian absorbed the words. That evening, Claire asked him to handle bedtime alone. Nora had become accustomed to nursing before sleep, but Claire wanted to weaken the association gradually. Julian carried Nora into the nursery. Claire remained in the hallway. At first, Nora cried and reached toward the door. Julian sat beside the crib. He sang softly in Italian. His voice was low and imperfect. Nora held the rail, trembling with frustration. Julian placed his hand between the bars. I am here, Nora cried. He kept singing. After several minutes, she wrapped her fingers around one of his. Her breathing slowed. She lowered herself onto the mattress without releasing him. Julian sat on the floor until she fell asleep. When he stepped into the hallway, Claire saw tears in his eyes. She chose me. She trusted you. I thought those were the same thing. They can become the same thing. Julian looked back at the nursery. She closed her eyes. She believed you would still be there when she opened them. He turned toward Claire. You make everything sound simple. It is not simple. No. His gaze moved across her face. It is not. The distance between them felt suddenly fragile. Claire stepped away first. 3 evenings later, Julian cooked dinner. Garlic and rosemary filled the kitchen. He moved with practiced confidence, tasting a sauce before adding salt. Claire sat at the counter with Nora on her lap. You could have hired someone to do this. I did. What happened? I disliked his risotto. So you fired him? He insulted my mother. Claire raised an eyebrow. Julian glanced at her. He called her recipe rustic. Claire laughed. Nora slapped both hands against the counter. Julian smiled. My mother believed every person should know how to feed the people they loved. Did she teach you? She forced me. What was she like? Julian stirred the sauce, loud, beautiful, impossible to frighten. Like Elena. The spoon stopped. Julian looked into the pan. Elena was quieter. Claire waited. Our marriage was arranged by people who believed two families could solve business problems by combining names. Did you love her? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. Not the way stories describe it. We were not reckless. We did not destroy rooms or make promises in the rain. Claire smiled faintly. That sounds disappointing. She would agree. His expression softened. Elena was practical. She understood my world before she entered it. She knew where every body was buried, sometimes literally, and still complained that I left wet towels on the floor. Claire looked down at Nora. What happened at the hospital? Julian set the spoon aside. I was in a meeting. Did you know she was in labor? She told me not to come yet. She said it would take hours. His hands rested against the counter. There were complications. By the time Marcus reached me, she was already in surgery. Claire said nothing. I arrived after Nora was born. Elena was alive for another 12 minutes, but they would not let me into the room. The bitterness in his voice was controlled, but not diminished. I could hear people moving behind the doors. Then a doctor came out holding my daughter. Julian looked at Nora. She was screaming. Claire's throat tightened. I held her while Elena died 3 rooms away. Julian. For months, every time Nora cried, I was back in that corridor. He pressed both palms against the counter. Sometimes I looked at her and saw the last thing Elena gave me. A long pause. Sometimes I saw the reason Elena was gone. Claire stood and placed Nora in the high chair. Then she approached Julian. Grief creates cruel thoughts. I chose distance. You can choose differently. I am trying. I know. Julian looked at her. How? Because she reaches for you now. His eyes closed briefly. They ate dinner near the windows while the river moved below. After Nora fell asleep, Julian poured coffee and asked the question Claire had feared since entering his home. What was Lucy like? Claire stared into her cup. She was small. How small? 4 pounds, 3 ounces. Julian waited. She had dark hair, 10 fingers, 10 toes. One eyebrow had a tiny crease above it. Claire pressed her thumb into her palm. The nurse said she looked peaceful. You saw her after. Julian's face tightened. They wrapped her in a white blanket. I held her for 11 minutes. Claire had never spoken that number aloud. 11 minutes, she repeated. That was all the time I had with my daughter. Julian reached across the table. His hand covered hers. Claire did not pull away. I never told her I loved her, she said. She knew. You cannot know that. No. His thumb moved once across her knuckles. But Nora knew you were safe before she understood your name. Claire's eyes filled. That is not the same. It is not. Julian's voice softened. But love reaches children before language does. Claire looked at him through tears. He stood and came around the table. He opened his arms slowly. She moved into them. Julian held her with no urgency and no demand. Claire rested her face against his chest and cried for Lucy, for the hospital room, for the empty nursery, and for every morning she had woken disappointed to still be alive. Julian did not tell her to stop. When she finally pulled away, his shirt was damp. I am sorry. I own more shirts. Claire laughed through the tears. His hand remained at her waist. The sound faded. They became aware of how close they stood. Julian's eyes lowered to her mouth. Claire stepped back. Good night? His hand fell. Good night, Claire. Rachel visited the following afternoon. She arrived carrying groceries Julian did not need and suspicion he could not buy his way out of. Nora sat on the floor between cushions reaching for blocks while Julian answered a call near the windows. Rachel watched him end the conversation when Nora made a frustrated sound. "He looks different," she said. "He is tired. That is not what I mean." Claire sat beside Nora. Rachel lowered her voice. "You were supposed to stay 14 days. It has been 23. You counted. Every morning." Rachel watched Nora crawl into Claire's lap. "Do you love her?" Claire looked down. "Yes. Do you need her?" Claire took longer to answer. "Yes." Rachel nodded slowly. "At least you are honest." Claire looked toward Julian. He had crouched beside the coffee table, pretending to examine a toy while listening to them. Rachel followed her gaze, and Claire said nothing. "You cannot live inside this arrangement forever without naming it. Nora still needs consistency." "That was not my question." Claire stood and carried Nora toward the kitchen. Rachel followed. "What happens when she no longer needs to nurse?" Claire stopped. The question struck deeper than she expected. "She will still need care. From someone. From me. Does Julian know that Claire turned?" Rachel's expression was gentle now. "I am not trying to take this away from you. I'm trying to make sure it belongs to you before you build your whole life around it." That night, Claire told Julian she was going back to her apartment for one night. He stood in the nursery doorway. "Why, Nora needs to know I can leave and return. She is doing well. That is why we should try now." Julian's face closed. "You want to leave? For one night?" "Of course." Claire heard the distance in his voice. "This is not punishment. I did not say it was. You did not need to." Julian looked at Nora sleeping in the crib. "I will handle bedtime." Claire packed one bag. At the elevator, Nora reached toward her and began to cry. Every instinct in Claire told her to stay. Julian took Nora. "Go." The words sounded rough. Claire stepped into the elevator before she could change her mind. Her apartment felt smaller than she remembered. She stood in the hallway facing the closed nursery door. Then she opened it. Dust covered the crib rail. Tiny clothes remained folded inside drawers. A wooden mobile hung motionless above the mattress. Claire sat on the floor. She took Lucy's hospital bracelet from a box and held it against her palm. "I love her," she whispered. The room remained still. "But she is not you." Claire bowed her head. "I am not replacing you." The words hurt. She said them again. Across the city, Julian sat on the nursery floor while Nora cried in his arms. He offered a bottle. She refused. He sang the song his mother taught him. Nora reached toward the door. "She is coming back," Julian whispered. The promise was meant for both of them. After nearly an hour, Nora accepted the bottle. She fell asleep with her hand closed around Julian's finger. Claire returned the next morning. Julian stood in the kitchen holding Nora. The baby stared at Claire for one breath, then smiled and reached for her. Claire took her, kissed her forehead, and looked at Julian. "How was the night?" she cried. "I assumed." She ate. Claire smiled. "You did it." Julian's expression remained guarded. "She can be safe without you for one night." Claire heard what he did not say. "And you." His eyes met hers. That was different. Claire handed Nora back to him. "We need to talk." Julian looked toward the windows. "You want to leave. I want to know what I am doing here. You came to help Nora. That was 24 days ago. She is improving. I will honor our agreement." Claire's voice sharpened. "That is not what I asked." Julian turned. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth." His jaw tightened. "You should return to your life. That is not the truth. It is the intelligent choice. For whom? For you. Claire stepped closer. You do not get to decide for me because you are afraid. Julian's control finally cracked. Every day you stay, this becomes less survivable. Claire stopped. What does... You leaving? The room went still. Julian crossed toward her, then stopped before touching her. I have spent weeks telling myself that this is about Nora. That I watch you because I need to understand what she needs. That I change my schedule because I want to become a better father. His voice lowered. All of that is true. Claire's pulse climbed. But it is not the whole truth. Then tell me the rest. Julian looked at her as though honesty were more dangerous than any weapon. I want you here when Nora is asleep. Claire could barely breathe. I want to hear you argue with my coffee machine. I want your books in the office and your shoes beside the door. I want you to look at me the way you do when you forget what I am. I do not forget. That should make this easier. It does not. Julian lifted one hand and stopped inches from her face. If I touch you, Claire, I do not know how to pretend this is temporary. She closed the distance herself. Then stop pretending. His hand settled against her cheek. The kiss began carefully. Julian gave her time to move away. Claire did not. She gripped the front of his shirt and kissed him with all the restraint she had carried since the night he asked her to enter his home. His other hand moved to her waist. The kiss, deep and hungry, but controlled, filled with fear, neither of them could name without breaking it. Nora cried through the monitor. They separated, breathing hard. Claire rested her forehead against Julian's chest. Then she laughed. Julian looked toward the monitor. Your timing is terrible, he said. Claire smiled. She learned from you. They entered the nursery together. Julian lifted Nora from the crib. Claire stood beside him. Nora looked from one face to the other, then reached out with both hands. One settled against Julian's chest. The other curled around Claire's finger. Neither of them spoke. They simply stayed. For 11 quiet days, that choice felt almost ordinary. Claire woke beside the sound of Nora babbling through the monitor. Julian attended fewer meetings outside the penthouse. He learned how Nora liked her oatmeal, how she rubbed one eye when she was tired, and how she became angry when anyone tried to take away the wooden spoon she carried from room to room. Some mornings, Claire found him barefoot in the kitchen reading reports while Nora sat on the counter under one protective arm. The sight still surprised her, not because Julian looked gentle, because gentleness no longer looked temporary on him. They did not discuss the kiss immediately. There were no declarations and no sudden change in sleeping arrangements. Julian touched Claire more often, but never without giving her time to move away. His hand rested briefly at the center of her back when he passed behind her. His fingers brushed hers when he handed her coffee. At night, they sat closer on the sofa. The space between them became less like distance, and more like a promise neither of them wanted to rush. Then Julian came home with blood on his cuff. Claire was sitting on the nursery floor while Nora attempted to stack 2 wooden blocks. The private elevator opened, followed by the sound of fast footsteps. Marcus entered first. His suit jacket was open. One hand remained near the weapon beneath it. Julian followed. His face was calm, but his white shirt was stained near the wrist. Claire stood immediately. Are you hurt? No. Nora looked toward his voice and smiled. Julian did not return the smile. He crossed the room, crouched beside his daughter, and touched her hair. Claire looked at the blood again. Whose is it? One of my men. Is he alive? Julian's silence answered. Marcus moved toward the windows and checked the street below. Claire lifted Nora. What happened? A warehouse was attacked near the port. How many people? Julian rose. 3 dead. 2 injured. His voice remained controlled, but Claire saw the strain in his jaw. Who did it? We are still confirming that. Do you have enemies who would do something like this? Marcus looked at Julian. Julian answered, yes. The simplicity of it chilled her more than a detailed explanation might have. He walked into the bedroom and returned carrying a travel bag. Pack what you need for Nora. Claire did not move. Where are we going? There is a property in the mountains. For how long? A few days. And you? Julian looked toward Marcus. I remain here. Claire tightened her hold on Nora. No, this is not a discussion. The words changed the room. Claire felt herself return to another kitchen, another house, another man who believed volume was unnecessary when power already belonged to him. Julian saw the reaction in her face. He took a step closer. Claire, you do not decide where I go and then inform me. People died tonight. I heard you. Then understand that Nora may be a target. I understand exactly what you are saying. Marcus will take you somewhere secure, and you expect me to wait there without knowing whether you are alive. This is my responsibility. No, this is your instinct. His eyes hardened. My instinct has kept people alive. Your instinct also tells you to shut everyone out the moment you are afraid. I am not afraid. Claire stared at the blood on his sleeve. You are terrified. Marcus quietly left the nursery. Julian waited until the door closed. You have never seen what happens when someone challenges me directly. Then explain it. There is nothing you can do with the information. That is not your decision. It is when the information puts you in danger. Claire set Nora carefully inside the crib. Then she faced him. You asked me to stay in your life. Yes. You do not get to call me family when you want comfort and a liability when you want control. His face went still. That is not what you are. Then stop treating me like something to be moved. Julian looked toward Nora. She was standing with both hands gripping the crib rail, watching them. His voice dropped. My men need to see me respond. They need to see you think. You believe I do not. I believe grief makes you reckless. Anger flashed in his eyes. Claire continued before fear could stop her. You lost Elena in a hospital you reached too late. Now every threat becomes another chance to arrive too late again. Julian said nothing. You cannot outrun that by putting yourself at the center of every fight. His hands closed at his sides. What are you asking? All three of us go to the mountain property. You coordinate from there. If you must return to Savannah, you return to us every night. You do not understand what that might look like. Then show me. You may not like the man you see. Claire stepped closer. I already know the gentle parts of you. They are not the only parts I agreed to know. Julian searched her face. You are asking to enter a world you cannot simply leave. I entered it the night a crying baby was placed in my arms. For a long moment the only sound came from Nora tapping one block against the crib rail. Finally Julian nodded. We leave in 2 hours. The drive north lasted nearly 5. Savannah's lights disappeared behind them. Highways narrowed into dark roads lined by trees. Nora slept through most of the journey while Claire watched Julian from the opposite seat. He spoke quietly into a secure phone. Names and locations passed through the conversation. Some words meant nothing to Claire. Others meant enough. Shipment, retaliation, territory, bodies. Julian ended one call and immediately began another. Claire listened to the transformation in his voice. At home, he spoke to Nora with patience. Here, each sentence was short and exact. He did not threaten anyone. He did not need to. Every person on the other end understood the consequences of disappointing him. The mountain property appeared after midnight. A stone house stood behind 2 security gates surrounded by forest. Exterior lights illuminated armed guards positioned near the drive. Nora woke when the car stopped. She looked at the trees beyond the windows and made a soft sound of wonder. Julian lifted her from the car seat. For 1 second, the man on the phone disappeared. "Those are trees, Principessa." Claire stood beside him. She has seen trees, not like these. Wind moved through the branches. Nora reached toward the sound. The house was warmer than Claire expected. Heavy wooden furniture filled the rooms. A fire burned in the main fireplace. Family photographs lined one wall. Claire paused beside an image of a younger Julian standing between Elena and Marcus. Elena wore a white summer dress and held one hand over her pregnant stomach. She was smiling at Julian. Julian was not looking at the camera. He was looking at her. Claire felt a sharp, unexpected ache. Not jealousy. The photograph reminded her that the life she entered had not begun with her. Julian noticed where she was looking. That was taken 6 weeks before Nora was born. She was beautiful. Yes. He did not hide the pain in the answer. Claire touched the frame lightly. Nora should have copies in her room. Julian's expression shifted. You would be comfortable with that. She should know her mother's face. Julian looked at Claire for a long time. Then he carried Nora upstairs. By morning, the dining room had become a command center. Computers covered the table. Maps of the port lay beneath secure phones. Marcus and Adrian spoke in low voices while Julian stood at the head of the room. Claire entered carrying Nora. Conversation stopped. Julian looked at the men. She stays. No one objected. Claire sat near the windows and fed Nora pieces of banana while listening. The attack had targeted a warehouse connected to Julian's shipping network. The men responsible were believed to work for Victor Harrow, an older leader whose organization controlled routes farther south. Adrian placed photographs on the table. 2 vehicles, both registered through shell companies. Witnesses, Julian asked. One dock worker saw 4 men leave. He recognized one as a Harrow associate. Marcus folded his arms. We should answer before they mistake restraint for weakness. Julian looked at the photographs. What does an answer cost? Marcus hesitated. Depends how final you want it. Claire watched Julian's face. He asked, how many civilians work near the Harrow facility? Adrian looked surprised. About 20 during night operations. We do nothing there. Marcus frowned. They killed 3 of ours. And I will not kill someone loading crates for $12 an hour to make a point. Claire saw Marcus glance at her. He believed the decision came from her. Perhaps part of it did, but Julian's voice carried no uncertainty. Contact Harrow's lieutenants, Julian said. Find out which of them still values business more than pride. The meeting continued for 2 hours. Claire left when Nora became tired. Upstairs, the child crawled across a thick rug and laughed at dust moving through a column of sunlight. For Nora, the house contained no war, only new rooms. Claire tried to preserve that. She maintained meals and naps. She read the same books. She played the same music before bedtime. At night, Julian returned upstairs with exhaustion pressed into every line of his body. On the 3rd evening, Claire found him in the kitchen staring at a glass of whiskey he had not touched. Did you eat? No. She placed a plate in front of him. He looked at it. You do not have to take care of me. I know. He sat. Claire remained across from him. 2 of Harrow's men agreed to negotiate, he said. Is that good? It means they are not united. And the alternative, Julian lifted his eyes. People die. Claire waited. Will innocent people die? Not by my order. That was not the question. His expression hardened. You wanted honesty. I still do. If negotiations fail, Harrow will attack again. I will respond. Once that begins, control becomes difficult. Claire looked down at his untouched food. Then do everything possible before it begins. You think I have not. I think some men around you need violence to feel important. Marcus stood in the doorway. Claire had not heard him enter. Julian looked at him. Marcus said. "She is not wrong." Claire turned. Marcus stepped into the room. "Some of the younger men think the settlement makes us look weak." "What settlement?" Claire asked. Julian answered. "Harrow offered new boundaries. We lose one route and gain access to another. Does it prevent another attack?" "For now." Claire looked between them. "Then why would your own people oppose it?" Marcus said. "Because peace gives ambitious men less room to rise." The words remained with Claire long after the men returned downstairs. 5 days later, Julian signed the agreement. No celebration followed. 3 families received money for funerals, debts, and future expenses. Julian called each widow personally. Claire listened from the hallway as he spoke to the wife of a man named Samuel. "I should have protected him," Julian said. A long silence followed. "No, you will not lose the house." Another silence. "Your son's tuition is covered." When the call ended, Julian remained seated at the desk. Claire entered. "You remember all their families. I know every person who works directly for me. Does that make the losses easier?" "No." He looked at the photographs on his desk. "It makes them impossible to turn into numbers." Claire placed a hand on his shoulder. Julian covered it with his own. They returned to Savannah the following week. The city appeared unchanged. Ships moved through the river. Tourists crossed the squares. Music came from open restaurant doors. The penthouse felt familiar after the mountain house. Nora crawled directly toward her basket of toys. Claire began to believe the worst had passed. 3 nights later, Rachel called at 3 in the morning. Claire woke to the phone vibrating beside her bed. Julian slept next to her, one arm resting across the empty space between them. They had begun sharing the room 2 nights earlier. Nothing about it felt casual. Claire answered quietly. "Rachel." "Someone sent me pictures." Rachel's voice shook. "What pictures? You?" "Nora." "Julian. The mountain house." Claire sat up. Julian opened his eyes. Rachel continued. "There is one of you feeding Nora. One from the park. One taken through the windows of the penthouse." Claire's blood turned cold. "Send everything. The message says they will report you to the licensing board and child services unless you leave Julian within 24 hours. Julian was already reaching for his phone. Claire left the bed and walked into the hallway. "Did they identify themselves? No. They said Julian is using you. They said Nora is in danger. Do you believe them?" "No." Rachel inhaled sharply. "But someone has been watching you for weeks." The files arrived. Claire opened the first photograph. She was sitting on a bench beside the river with Nora asleep against her. The next showed Julian touching Claire's face through the penthouse window. Another showed Nora's nursery. The angle came from inside the room. Julian appeared behind Claire. His face changed as he examined the images. This was taken inside the penthouse. Claire looked at him. How he called Marcus. Within minutes, security moved through every room. Claire entered the nursery while 2 guards examined the vents and ceiling. Nora slept inside her crib. Claire picked up the stuffed rabbit Rachel had bought during her first visit. A tiny red light blinked beneath one glass eye. Claire stopped breathing. She opened the seam with shaking fingers. A camera rested inside the stuffing. Julian stood in the doorway. Claire held it up. His face became colder than she had ever seen. Not loud, not uncontrolled. Empty of everything except intention. Someone had entered their home. Someone had stood close enough to Nora's crib to place a camera beside her sleeping face. Julian crossed the room and took the device. Claire stepped between him and the door. "Do not disappear." His gaze remained on the camera. "Claire, do not lock me upstairs. Do not send me away. Do not decide that loving me gives you the right to remove me from this." He looked at Nora, then at Claire. His voice was barely above a whisper. They came into her room. I know. They watched you feed her. I know. I should have protected you. Claire placed one hand against his chest. Then protect us by letting me stand beside you. For several seconds, Julian did not move. Then he covered her hand with his. When he spoke, the coldness remained, but the command was gone. Get dressed. Claire searched his face. Where are we going? To find out which person I trusted brought an enemy into my daughter's room. Julian's words followed Claire through the penthouse as security lights came on one room at a time. Men moved through the halls with quiet urgency. Drawers opened. Vents were removed. Every toy in Nora's nursery was carried to the dining room and placed beneath white examination lights. Nora woke during the search. Claire held her near the windows while Marcus cut open the stuffed rabbit completely. Plastic stuffing spilled across the table. Beneath it rested a camera, no larger than a coin, a transmitter, and a battery designed to last for months. Adrian Cole examined the device through a magnifying lens. This was not purchased in a store. Julian stood across from him. Can you trace it? Parts, perhaps. The signal was encrypted and routed through several private networks. How long has it been here? Adrian lifted the battery. At least 3 weeks, possibly longer. Claire looked down at Nora. 3 weeks. Someone had watched her sleep. Someone had listened while Claire sang to her. Someone had seen Julian stand beside the crib in the middle of the night, too afraid to touch his daughter because he did not want to wake her. The violation felt physical. Julian turned toward Marcus. Who entered the nursery house staff? Security. Dr. Porter once. Rachel and Daniel, the delivery team that installed the new air system. And my people. Marcus hesitated. Caleb brought documents upstairs twice. Adrian entered during the camera inspection last month. I have been in the room. Julian's eyes moved from one man to the other. No one leaves the building. Marcus nodded. Claire tightened her arms around Nora. Julian noticed. He crossed to her slowly. I need you in the bedroom. No. Claire, you said I could stand beside you. I said that before I knew the person responsible may still be inside. So you want me behind a locked door while you question everyone. I want Nora away from this room. That is different. Julian looked at the baby. Nora was playing with the button on Claire's shirt, unaware of the fear around her. He lowered his voice. Take her to our room. Keep the door open. Marcus will place 2 guards outside. Claire searched his face. You stay where I can find you. I will. It was not surrender. It was compromise. Claire carried Nora down the hall. For the next 2 hours, the penthouse became a place she no longer recognized. Voices stayed low behind closed doors. Phones were collected. Security records were copied. Staff members were interviewed separately. No one shouted. The quiet made everything more dangerous. Claire sat on the bedroom floor with Nora and tried to maintain the morning routine. She stacked blocks. Nora knocked them down. Claire read the same page of a board book 3 times without understanding the words. Nora touched her cheek. Claire forced a smile. You are safe. The statement came out softer than she intended. She did not know whether it was true. Julian entered near sunrise. His jacket was gone. His sleeves were rolled up. Fatigue shadowed his face. Claire stood. Did you find anything? Not enough. Who had access? Too many people. That is not an answer. It is the answer I have. He sat on the edge of the bed. Claire placed Nora beside him. The baby crawled across the blanket and pulled herself upright using his arm. Julian steadied her. Adrian found a gap in the security records, he said. The camera system was disabled for 9 minutes on 3 separate evenings. Who can do that, Marcus? Adrian, me, 2 senior security officers. and Caleb Julian looked at Nora. He used to have access. Used to, I removed it after he transferred to operations. Claire studied his expression. You trust him. I have trusted him for 9 years. That is not what I asked. Julian lifted his eyes. Yes. The answer cost him. Claire sat beside him. Trust does not become proof because it has lasted a long time. Julian said nothing. Nora placed one hand on each of them. The gesture might have made Claire smile on another morning. Now it felt like a warning. At 10, a child welfare investigator arrived. Her name was Helen Ward. She wore a gray suit, practical shoes, and an expression that revealed nothing. A second investigator accompanied her. Julian's attorney waited near the elevator. We can refuse entry until they obtain a court order, he said. Claire looked at Julian. No. The attorney turned toward her. Ms. Bennett, these accusations involve your professional conduct. I understand. Anything you say may be used during a licensing review. Claire took Nora from Marcus. Then we tell the truth carefully. Julian stepped closer. You do not have to do this today. Yes, I do. The investigators entered. Helen examined the security arrangements, the nursery, the kitchen, and the medical supplies. She asked Claire how the feeding relationship began. Claire answered without embellishment. She described the wedding, Nora's distress, Julian's consent, Dr. Porter's evaluation, and the lactation consultant's plan. Helen asked, Do you consider yourself this child's therapist? No. Have you billed the family for psychological services? No. Are you in a romantic relationship with Mr. Cross? Claire looked at Julian. Yes. The word settled across the room. Helen wrote it down. When did the relationship become romantic after the caregiving arrangement began? Do you believe that creates a conflict? Yes. Julian's eyes shifted toward her. Claire continued. That is why I have never treated Nora as a patient. Her medical care remains with Dr. Porter. Her developmental evaluations are performed by independent professionals. My role began as temporary caregiving and has become personal. Helen looked at Julian. And your relationship with Miss Bennett? Julian's voice was calm. She is my partner. Does she receive payment? She received compensation under the original written agreement. That agreement ended. Does she have access to her own finances? Yes. Can she leave this residence without your permission? Julian glanced at Claire. Yes. Helen closed her notebook. I would like to observe you with Nora separately. Julian's attorney objected. Julian silenced him with one look. Claire carried Nora into the nursery and placed her on the carpet. Helen asked Claire to leave. Claire's body resisted. Nora noticed the movement and began crawling toward her. Julian sat on the floor. I am here. Claire remained in the doorway for one breath. Then she stepped into the hall. Nora cried. Claire pressed her hands together. Inside the nursery, Julian began singing the old Italian song. The crying continued, then weakened, then stopped. Helen remained inside for 20 minutes. When she emerged, her expression was still professional, but less guarded. There is no immediate evidence that Nora is unsafe. Julian's shoulders lowered by a fraction. Helen continued. The report remains open while we verify the medical records and interview the pediatrician. I also need to address the presence of armed security. They are licensed, Julian's attorney said. I will verify that. Helen looked at Claire. Your licensing board may contact you separately. I understand. At the elevator, Helen paused. Someone provided detailed information about this home. Claire looked toward the nursery. We know. Then take that seriously. The elevator closed. Julian stood motionless. Claire approached him. You did well. I sat on the floor while a stranger decided whether I deserved my daughter. You stayed calm. I wanted to throw her out, but you did not. His eyes met hers. That is what matters. Julian looked toward the closed elevator. No. What matters is that someone made her come here. By afternoon, Adrian had traced the anonymous message to a legal office in Atlanta. The attorney who controlled the account had represented companies connected to Victor Harrow. Adrian placed the records on Julian's desk. Harrow is hiding behind legal intermediaries. Julian leaned back. Why now? Because the warehouse settlement changed the balance. Several of his people think your restraint made you vulnerable. Claire stood beside the windows. Or someone told him restraint would isolate Julian from his own men. Adrian looked at her. What makes you say that? The report was not written to protect Nora. It was written to embarrass Julian. She crossed toward the desk. It questions his judgment, his ability to control his home, and his relationship with me. It does not accuse him of a specific crime. It presents him as distracted. Julian watched her. Claire continued. Victor is not only trying to remove me, he is trying to make your people believe I weakened you. Adrian nodded slowly. The annual waterfront summit is in 5 days. Claire looked at Julian. What happens there? Every major organization in the region attends. To negotiate, to measure one another. Adrian closed the file. If Harrow plans to challenge you publicly, that is where he will do it. Julian stood. Then we let him. The next morning, Claire received a message from Mason. She stared at his name until the letters blurred. I heard about Lucy. I think we should talk. Claire had not heard his voice in 4 months. Her first instinct was to delete the message. Then another arrived. Someone contacted me about you. They offered money. Claire found Julian in the kitchen. He saw her face. What happened? She handed him the phone. Julian read the messages. His expression became still. I will have Marcus bring him in. No. Claire, I will meet him. Absolutely not. She took the phone back. In a public place. Rachel will come with me. Your security can remain nearby. He controlled you. He did. He blamed you for Lucy. Yes. And you want to sit across from him? I want to hear what he knows. Julian's voice dropped. I can get the information without putting you in front of him. That is not the only reason I am going. He looked at her. Claire said, I spent months hearing his voice in my head. I need to know it sounds smaller outside of me. Julian did not answer immediately. Finally he said, Marcus chooses the location. Claire nodded. And Rachel sits at the table. Yes. Mason arrived 20 minutes late. The restaurant overlooked a busy public square. Families moved between outdoor tables. A police station stood 2 blocks away. Rachel sat beside Claire. Marcus occupied a table near the door. Mason looked older than Claire remembered. His expensive shirt was wrinkled. He glanced around the room before sitting. You brought security. Claire looked at him. I brought witnesses. His mouth tightened. You always make things dramatic. The old sentence struck the old wound. This time Claire recognized it before it entered her. Who contacted you? Mason leaned back. No greeting. No. You disappeared after the funeral. You told people I killed our daughter. I said stress was a factor. You created the stress. Rachel placed one hand near Claire's but did not interrupt. Mason looked toward the door. A lawyer called me, said he represented a family concerned about a child in your care. What was his name? Eric Dalton. Claire had seen the name in Adrian's records. What did he want? Information about your mental state after Lucy died, your medication, your hospital records, whether you were obsessed with having another baby. Claire felt cold. And what did you tell him that you were unstable? Rachel inhaled sharply. Claire stayed focused. How much did he pay you? Mason's face changed. That is not important. It is the only honest thing left in this conversation. 5,000. Claire stared at him. You sold my grief for $5,000. You left me with expenses. Our daughter died. I lost her too. Claire's voice remained quiet. You lost control of me. Mason leaned forward. You think that man is better? I know who Julian Cross is. No. You know what people say about him. He kills people, and you hurt people while convincing them it is their fault. The words landed. Mason's face reddened. Claire continued. You monitored my phone. You controlled the money. You told me my pain was inconvenient. You made me doubt every instinct I had. You are rewriting history. No. Claire looked him directly in the eyes. I am remembering it without your permission. Mason stood. Marcus rose at the other table. Claire did not move. Sit down, she said. Mason looked toward Marcus and slowly returned to the chair. Did Dalton give you anything else? Mason removed a card from his wallet. He said to call if you contacted me. Claire took the card. Do not call him. What happens to me? Nothing. Mason seemed surprised. Claire stood. You do not matter enough to Julian's enemies to protect. She left the table without looking back. Outside, her hands began shaking. Rachel embraced her. Claire rested her forehead against Rachel's shoulder. Marcus remained several feet away, giving them privacy. When Claire returned to the penthouse, Julian waited near the elevator. He did not ask whether Mason deserved punishment. He asked, Are you all right? No. Claire walked into his arms. He held her. After a moment, she said, Thank you for keeping your promise. Julian closed his eyes. I wanted to break it, but you did not. No. She looked up at him. That is why I came home. The word home changed his face. He kissed her forehead. Adrian used the attorney's card to confirm Victor's connection to Mason and the false report. The evidence was strong enough to reveal a campaign, but not enough to remove Victor. They still needed proof of the surveillance and the breach inside the penthouse. 2 days before the summit, Marcus entered Julian's office carrying a tablet. We found the access. Julian looked up. Claire stood near the bookshelf. Marcus placed the tablet on the desk. Security footage showed Caleb Shaw entering the service corridor on 3 separate nights. Each time, cameras failed minutes later. He used an old code, Marcus said, one I thought had been disabled. Julian watched the footage twice. Caleb appeared calm, familiar, trusted. Claire saw something collapse behind Julian's eyes. Where is he? At the South Warehouse. Bring him in. Marcus hesitated. Quietly, Julian looked at Claire. Yes. Caleb arrived an hour later. He entered the office without knowing he was being watched from the adjoining room. Claire stood behind the glass with Adrian and Marcus. Julian sat alone at his desk. Caleb smiled. You wanted to see me? Julian turned the tablet toward him. Caleb's smile disappeared. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Caleb said, That does not prove anything. You entered a restricted corridor using an old code. I was checking a delivery. At midnight. Caleb looked toward the door. Julian remained seated. Victor promised you my position. Caleb's face hardened. He promised stability. You brought a camera into my daughter's room. I never touched the child. Julian stood. Caleb stepped back. You watched her sleep. It was information. It was my family. Caleb's fear finally appeared. Julian moved around the desk. From the adjoining room, Claire felt Marcus tense. Julian stopped inches from Caleb. Why? Caleb swallowed. Because you changed. That is not an answer. You let Harrow kill 3 men and answered with a negotiation. I kept 20 civilians alive. You used to understand that fear was the only language people respected. Julian's voice became colder. And now every decision passes through her. Caleb looked toward the hidden glass. He did not know Claire stood behind it. You brought a therapist into your home and started asking whether enemies had families. Julian stared at him. Caleb continued. You are losing the organization. No. Julian's expression settled into something terrible and calm. I am losing men who confuse cruelty with strength. He called Marcus into the room. Keep him secured until after the summit. Caleb's face changed. What are you going to do? Julian answered. Decide whether the life you wanted is worth what it costs. On the evening of the summit, Rachel helped Claire dress. The gown was dark green, simple at the shoulders, fitted through the waist. Claire's hair fell in loose waves. Rachel adjusted an earring. You do not have to go. Yes, I do. You have said that too often since meeting Julian. Claire looked at herself in the mirror. The first time I stood beside an altar in a formal dress, I was trying to disappear. Rachel met her eyes in the reflection. And tonight, I want Victor Harrow to see me. Julian waited in the living room wearing a black tuxedo. When Claire entered, he stopped speaking. Marcus glanced away. Claire approached Julian. You are staring. I am reconsidering taking you into a room full of enemies. Because I look vulnerable. No. His eyes moved over her once. Because they will. Claire touched his lapel. Let them. The summit occupied the upper floor of a waterfront hotel. Security collected every weapon at the entrance. Men with old names and expensive suits filled the ballroom. Their wives, advisors, and adult children stood beside them. Conversation slowed when Julian and Claire entered. His hand rested at the center of her back. He did not guide her. He matched her pace. Victor Harrow approached near the windows. He was in his 60s, silver-haired and elegant, with the easy smile of a man who preferred others to underestimate him. Julian. Victor. Victor turned to Claire. So this is Claire Bennett. Claire offered her hand. You seem well informed. Victor kissed the air near her knuckles without touching them. Savannah is a small city, not small enough for you to know the view from Nora's nursery. His smile remained. Only his eyes changed. Julian saw it. Victor released Claire's hand. You have a sharp mind. She does, Julian said. Victor looked between them. A dangerous quality in a woman standing beside a powerful man. Claire replied, Only to men who prefer women silent. Dinner began beneath chandeliers shaped like falling glass. Victor sat across from Claire. Throughout the meal, he spoke about responsibility tradition and the risks of mixing personal desire with leadership. He never mentioned the report directly. He did not need to. Children require stability, Victor said. Claire lifted her wine glass but did not drink. They also require adults who do not use them as leverage. Conversation around the table slowed. Victor smiled. You assume leverage is always cruel. I assume anyone who photographs a sleeping child has already answered that question. Julian's hand rested on Claire's knee beneath the table, not to silence her, to remain connected. Victor looked toward him. You have allowed emotion to enter decisions that once required clarity. Julian said, You confuse clarity with brutality. Victor leaned back. And you confuse restraint with evolution. A waiter placed dessert on the table. Adrian entered the ballroom and approached Julian. He whispered something. Julian's face did not change. Claire felt his hand tighten once. What happened? She asked quietly. Julian looked at Victor. 2 men posing as police officers attempted to enter my building. Victor continued eating. Claire's heart stopped. Nora safe. Rachel followed protocol. Marcus has the men. Victor set down his spoon. How fortunate. Julian rose. The room fell silent. Victor remained seated. Careful, he said. This floor exists because men agreed not to bring private wars to the table. Julian reached inside his jacket. Several guards moved. Claire stood beside him. He removed a black flash drive. Victor's expression changed. Adrian carried a case around the table and placed identical drives before each leader. Julian spoke calmly. Victor Harrow bribed child welfare contacts, purchased private medical information, financed illegal surveillance, corrupted members of my security team, and attempted to abduct my daughter. Victor looked around the table. Accusations from an emotional father. Julian pressed a control. The screens along the ballroom walls came alive. Financial records appeared. Messages, payments, photographs of the false police officers, audio from Caleb's phone. Victor's voice filled the room. Once the child is moved, Cross will react. His men will see panic. The organization will fracture. The recording ended. No one moved. Julian looked at Victor. You wanted me emotional. He reached for Claire's hand. You misunderstood what she changed. Victor's eyes narrowed. Julian continued. She did not make me weaker. She gave me something worth planning for. One by one, the other leaders withdrew their support from Victor. His shipping access was suspended. His allies demanded control of the territory he had used without permission. His legal contacts began disappearing from the room before the dinner ended. Victor stood. This does not end here. Julian looked at him. For you it does. He did not threaten Victor's life. He removed the structure that made Victor powerful. By midnight, Victor Harrow left the hotel alone. Caleb was brought to Julian's private office before dawn. Claire stood beside Julian. Caleb looked exhausted. He glanced at her. This is what I meant. She stands in rooms where she does not belong. Claire answered. I belong wherever decisions about my family are made. Caleb laughed bitterly. You think he will become a good man because you love him? No. Claire looked at Julian. I think he becomes the man he chooses repeatedly. Julian placed a file on the desk. Caleb had committed financial crimes through companies unrelated to the Cross organization. Adrian had collected enough evidence to guarantee a long federal sentence. Caleb looked at the file. You are turning me over to the government. Yes. That is worse than killing me. Julian's voice remained calm. You betrayed me because you wanted power. He closed the file. You can spend the next 20 years living without any. After Caleb was removed, Marcus remained near the door. Some people will call that mercy. Julian looked through the windows at the pale morning sky. Mercy is what a man gives when he no longer needs blood to prove he has power. Claire took his hand. The threat ended slowly. The child welfare case closed after Dr. Porter and the lactation consultant confirmed Nora's progress. Claire's licensing review lasted longer. Several clients left her practice after rumors reached their families. Julian offered to replace the income. Claire refused. I need to rebuild something that belongs to me. He did not argue. Instead, he helped her locate an office near the river, then stepped away from the negotiations when she asked. Nora continued gaining weight. She accepted bottles, solid food, and comfort from Julian. One afternoon, the lactation consultant told Claire they could begin weaning. Claire nodded as though the news pleased her. That evening, Julian found her in the kitchen labeling containers of frozen milk. Her movements were too precise. She is ready, he said. I know. This is good. I know. Claire closed the freezer. Julian waited. She pressed both hands against the counter. When she no longer needs this, I do not know what I am here for. He approached slowly. Claire kept her back to him. She needed milk, Julian said. Claire closed her eyes. She needed safety. Yes, she needed someone whose body could give her what mine could not. Claire turned, and when she does not need that, Julian stepped closer. She will still reach for you when she falls. That is not the same. No. He placed one hand against her cheek. I needed you to teach me how to become her father. Claire's eyes filled. But I love you because you are Claire. Nora crawled into the kitchen. She pulled herself upright using Claire's leg. Then she lifted both arms, not searching for food, asking to be held. Claire knelt and gathered her close. Julian wrapped one arm around both of them. Several days later, he drove Claire to the cemetery where Lucy was buried. The grave was small. Claire carried white roses. Julian carried one red rose for Elena. They stood together in the quiet morning. Claire placed the white flowers beneath Lucy's name. I used to think moving forward meant leaving her here. Julian set Elena's rose beside them. We cannot build a future by pretending they were never here. Claire looked at him. And we cannot honor them by refusing to live. Julian took her hand. For a long time they remained between the two women who had brought them to this place. One had been Julian's past. One had been Claire's impossible future. Neither was forgotten. When they returned home, Nora was waiting near the elevator in Marcus's arms. She saw Claire and reached out. Claire crossed the room. Julian followed. This time no one was watching from inside the walls. No one was deciding whether they belonged together. They entered the nursery as a family, and Julian closed the door behind them. For the first time since Claire had arrived at the penthouse, the silence inside that room felt private. No hidden camera blinked from a toy. No stranger studied their movements through a screen. No investigator waited outside to decide whether their love looked acceptable on paper. Nora rested against Claire's shoulder, one hand tangled in her hair. Julian stood beside them with his palm against the small of Claire's back. The danger had not disappeared. Victor Harrow still had loyal men. Caleb Shaw had not yet entered federal custody. Julian's organization remained built on a history Claire could not excuse simply because she loved the man who led it, but the fear no longer filled every corner of the room. Claire laid Nora inside the crib. The baby rolled onto her side and watched them through the wooden rails. Julian reached down. Nora wrapped her fingers around his. You can sleep, he whispered. We are both here. Claire looked at him. Both. The word was quiet, but it carried more weight than any promise he had made in anger or desperation. Nora's eyes closed. Julian remained beside the crib until her breathing deepened. When they stepped into the hall, Claire took his hand. I do not want this life to return to what it was before me. Julian looked toward the dark windows at the end of the corridor. It cannot. I mean your work. His expression changed. Claire continued. I know you cannot dismantle everything in one night. I know there are people who depend on you and enemies who would take advantage of any weakness. Then you understand why certain things must continue. I understand the argument. That is not the same as agreeing. No. Julian leaned against the wall. What are you asking me to do? Claire considered the question carefully. She had learned that Julian listened more closely when she did not speak from panic. I am asking you to decide what kind of world Nora will inherit. His eyes moved toward the nursery. She will never be part of the organization. She is already part of it. People used her to attack you. I will prevent that from happening again. You cannot prevent every threat. You can reduce what gives people a reason to threaten her. Julian looked away. My father spent his life building this, and you spent your life surviving what he built. His jaw tightened. Claire stepped closer. You told me your mother believed family meant the people who remained when everything fell apart. You have built loyalty through fear, money, and obligation. That loyalty kept us alive." "Yes." She placed her hand against his chest, but it nearly brought an enemy into Nora's crib. Julian covered her hand with his. "If I begin moving away from certain operations, people will resist. I know. Some will see it as weakness. They already do. And if I fail, the consequences will reach you." Claire held his gaze. "The consequences already reached me." He was silent for a long time. Then he nodded once. "I will speak to Adrian." It was not a promise to become a different man by morning. Claire trusted it more because of that. Change came slowly. Julian began with the waterfront companies. Several businesses that had once moved illegal shipments started accepting only documented cargo. Contracts were rewritten. Managers were replaced. Warehouses received new accounting systems that Adrian said would survive government examination. Men who had spent years profiting from secrecy complained. Some left. Others remained because Julian offered them legitimate positions with stable salaries. Marcus took control of a private security company that employed former soldiers and law enforcement officers. The company protected hospitals' shipping yards and small businesses that could not afford the firms used by larger corporations. Julian also created a fund for the families of men killed while working for him. Claire read the first draft. "You cannot call this compensation. Why?" "Because it sounds like payment for silence. What would you call it? Responsibility." He changed the name. Not every part of Julian's world became legal. Claire was not naive enough to believe it could. There were debts that could not be transferred onto spreadsheets, agreements made with men who did not recognize courts, threats that police officers could not address without placing innocent people in greater danger. Julian still carried a weapon. Marcus still checked every room before Nora entered it. Adrian still spoke in phrases designed to conceal more than they revealed. Claire did not pretend these things were normal. She insisted that honesty remained the price of her staying. One evening, Julian returned home after midnight. Claire sat awake in the living room. There was a bruise near his mouth. She stood. "What happened?" A meeting became physical. "Were you injured anywhere else?" "No." "Did you kill anyone?" Julian removed his jacket. "No." Claire searched his face. "Did someone else?" "No." She nodded. Julian looked almost offended. "You believe me, yes. Why?" "Because I asked you a direct question." He crossed the room. "And if the answer had been different, I would still need the truth." His hand settled against her waist. "You are the only person who asks me questions as though I am required to answer. You are." He lowered his forehead to hers. "I know." Nora's progress continued. She learned to stand without holding furniture. She began walking between Claire and Julian with her arms extended for balance. Every step seemed to shock her. The first time she crossed the living room alone, Julian dropped to one knee. "Come here, Principessa." Nora took 3 uncertain steps, then 4. She fell forward into his arms. Julian lifted her and turned in a slow circle. Claire laughed from beside the sofa. Nora laughed with her. Julian kissed his daughter's cheek. "You see that?" he asked Claire. She walked. I was standing 3 feet away. She walked to me. "You are going to repeat that for the rest of her life. Are you not?" "Yes." Nora reached toward Claire. Julian brought her closer, and Claire kissed the top of her head. The moment was ordinary. That made it precious. Claire completed the weaning process over several weeks. She expected Nora to resist. Instead, Nora adapted more easily than Claire did. The first night she fell asleep after drinking from a cup, Claire sat alone in the nursery chair. Her body still remembered the weight of Nora feeding against her. Her arms felt empty again. Not as they had after Lucy. This emptiness was different. It contained gratitude and grief at the same time. Julian found her there. He stood in the doorway. "She is asleep." "I know." "Are you all right?" Claire looked toward the crib. "I thought I would feel relieved." "You do not." "I feel unnecessary." Julian entered and sat on the ottoman across from her. "You are the first person she looks for when she is frightened. She looks for you, too." "Yes, that is what we wanted." "It is." Claire pressed her hands together. "I spent months believing my body failed Lucy. Then Nora needed something only my body could give her." Julian listened. "Now she does not need it. She does not need milk from you." Claire lowered her eyes. Julian reached for her hands. "She needs you to teach her kindness. She needs you to tell her when I am wrong. She needs you to remember Elena without making her feel divided between two mothers." Claire looked at him. "And you. I need you for reasons that would take the rest of my life to explain." A small smile touched her mouth. "That was almost romantic. I can do better. Do not hurt yourself." He brought her hands to his lips. Nora shifted inside the crib. Claire and Julian both looked toward her. The baby remained asleep. Claire leaned closer to him. "I am afraid she will grow older and believe I tried to replace Elena. She will know the truth. What truth? That Elena gave her life, that you helped give it back." Claire closed her eyes. Julian moved from the ottoman and knelt beside her chair. "You did not replace anyone." He placed one hand against her cheek. "You stayed after the need changed. That was the difference. A replacement existed only while it performed a function. A mother remained." Claire opened a new office near the river. The building was old with high windows and floors that creaked when people walked through the hall. Her waiting room contained soft chairs, children's books, and a shelf where patients could leave written memories of people they had lost. She named the practice Harbor Light Child Trauma Center. Julian disliked the first lease agreement. The landlord can raise the rent after 18 months. I negotiated a limit. He can still terminate under 3 vague conditions. "I have an attorney. Your attorney is too polite." Claire looked up from her desk. "Julian." He placed the contract down. "I am only saying Adrian could improve this. Adrian works for you. He is excellent. I want the office to belong to me. It will. Then allow me to build it." Julian looked at the walls. "You need better security. I need a door that locks. You need reinforced glass. This is a therapy office, not a military facility. It can be both." Claire stared at him. Julian sighed. "What am I permitted to do?" "You may recommend a security company. I own one. Then Marcus may send me a proposal and I may reject it." Julian looked personally wounded by the idea. Claire smiled. "You are learning. I dislike learning. You dislike not controlling the answer. That too." Marcus eventually installed a discreet alarm system, reinforced locks, and cameras covering only the building entrances. Claire approved every placement. The practice grew slowly. Some former clients returned after the licensing board closed its review without disciplinary action. New families came after Dr. Porter recommended Claire's work. Claire created a support group for parents who had lost infants. The first meeting had only 3 people. She sat with them in a circle after sunset. One father spoke about avoiding the cemetery because he could not bear seeing his child's name on stone. A mother admitted she still bought clothes in the size her daughter would have worn. Claire listened. When it was her turn, she took Lucy's hospital bracelet from her pocket. "My daughter lived for less than an hour," she said. For months, I believed that meant I had less right to grieve than mothers who had years. The room remained quiet. I know now that grief does not measure time. It measures love. She did not mention Nora. She did not need to use a second child to justify the first. Lucy existed in that room because Claire spoke her name. When she returned home, Julian was waiting at the kitchen table. "How was it, Hard? Do you want to talk?" "Not yet." He nodded. Claire set her bag down and crossed to him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not asking again." Julian pulled her into his lap. "I am becoming remarkably disciplined. You still have armed men following me to work. They remain across the street. That is not the point. It is an improvement." Claire laughed and rested her head against his shoulder. Months passed. Nora's hair grew long enough for Claire to tie it with a small ribbon. She developed a fierce dislike of peas and an equally fierce love of strawberries. She called Marcus Marr because his full name remained beyond her. She called Rachel Ra-Ra. Julian tried repeatedly to make her say Papa. Nora responded with delighted nonsense. Then one Sunday morning, Claire entered the living room carrying Lucy's wooden music box. She had finally emptied the nursery in her old apartment. Rachel had gone with her. They packed the clothes, folded the blankets, and removed the mobile from above the crib. Claire donated most of the furniture to a center for mothers leaving abusive homes. She kept the ultrasound picture, the bracelet, one white blanket, and the music box. Julian sat on the floor with Nora. Nora saw Claire and stood. "Mama." The room became completely still. Claire stopped walking. Nora smiled. "Mama." Julian looked at Claire. Joy rose in his face, then softened when he saw the tears in hers. Nora walked toward Claire. Claire knelt and placed the music box on the floor. The child touched her face. Claire held her small hand. "You had a mother before me." Nora watched her with solemn eyes. "Her name was Elena. She loved you before I knew your name." Julian lowered his head. Claire's voice trembled. "And there was another little girl named Lucy. She taught me how much a mother could love someone she barely had time to hold." Nora leaned into her. Claire gathered her close. "I am not here because they disappeared." She looked at Julian. "I am here because they brought us to each other." Julian crossed the room and wrapped his arms around them. Nora laughed between their bodies. Julian's eyes were wet. "She called you Mama." Claire smiled through tears. "She did. I heard it. You were sitting beside her. I want confirmation." Nora placed one hand against Claire's cheek. "Mama." Julian laughed. The sound filled the room. 3 weeks later, he took Claire back to the chapel outside Savannah. Rain fell softly against the windows. The building was empty except for Rachel, Daniel, Marcus, and Nora. Claire stood inside the side parlor where she had first held the crying baby. The same wingback chair rested near the window. She touched its wooden arm. "Why are we here?" Julian stood near the doorway. He wore a dark suit but no tie. Nora held Marcus's hand and attempted to pull him toward a vase of flowers. Marcus looked deeply uncomfortable. Rachel smiled. Claire turned toward Julian. "What have you done?" He crossed the room. "The first time I asked you to stay, I was desperate." Claire's breath changed. "The second time, I was afraid." Julian took her hand. "I believed needing you gave me the right to keep you close. You taught me that love without choice is only another form of control." He lowered himself onto one knee. Nora clapped before he removed the ring. Rachel covered her mouth. Julian looked up at Claire. "I am not asking you to save us." His voice remained steady, but his hand trembled. "I am asking you to walk beside me while I continue becoming someone worthy of the family we have built." He opened the ring box. Inside rested a simple diamond set between two smaller stones. "One is for Elena," Julian said. "One is for Lucy." Claire pressed a hand to her mouth. "The center is not meant to replace them." His eyes held hers. "It is the life we chose after them." Nora pulled away from Marcus and walked toward Julian. She placed both hands on his shoulder. Julian remained on one knee. Claire laughed through tears. "Yes." Julian stood. "You did not allow me to finish. You were taking too long." He kissed her. Nora pushed between them until Julian lifted her. Rachel and Daniel applauded. Marcus looked toward the ceiling, though his smile was visible. The legal preparations lasted longer than the engagement. Claire insisted on a separate attorney. Julian agreed. They created a prenuptial agreement protecting Claire's practice savings and property. Julian established a trust for Nora that could not be controlled by anyone inside the organization. Claire began the process of becoming Nora's legal parent. They also met with a counselor who specialized in grief and relationships shaped by trauma. Julian attended the first session with the expression of a man entering hostile territory. The counselor asked what brought them there. Claire answered, "We love each other." Julian added, "Apparently that is not sufficient." The counselor looked at him. "It is not." Julian glanced at Claire. "I already dislike this." Claire took his hand. "Stay." He did. During the sessions, Julian spoke about control as a survival skill. Claire spoke about how quickly protection could begin to resemble imprisonment. They learned to recognize the moments when old fear entered new arguments. Julian learned to ask whether Claire wanted help before offering a solution. Claire learned that independence did not require refusing every form of support. Neither became perfect. They became more honest. The wedding took place in a small chapel near the coast. 2 candles burned beside the altar. One bore Elena's name, the other bore Lucy's. Rachel stood beside Claire. Marcus stood beside Julian. Nora wore a cream dress and carried a basket of white petals. She dropped most of them in one place, then sat down to examine her work. The guests laughed softly. Julian left the altar, lifted her, and carried her the rest of the way. Claire watched them approach. The first wedding had begun with a baby screaming in a frightened father's arms. This one began with Nora laughing against Julian's shoulder. Claire's vows were written on paper, but she did not look down. "I once believed love was measured by what I could prevent from being taken away." She looked at Julian. "Then I met a man who could control an entire city, but could not control his fear." A quiet smile moved through the guests. Claire looked at Nora. "And I met a little girl who taught me that empty arms can still learn to hold someone without forgetting who they held before." Her voice trembled. "I promised to tell you the truth when silence would be easier. I promised to protect you without controlling you. I promised to speak Elena's name in our home and Lucy's name without apology." She took Julian's hands. "I promised to choose this family when fear tells me to run." Julian's eyes shone. When it was his turn, he looked briefly at the candles. "I spent most of my life believing power meant no one could force me to kneel." He looked at Nora. "Then my daughter cried, and I would have begged the entire world to save her." His gaze returned to Claire. "You did not save me by making my life safe." He tightened his hands around hers. "You saved me by teaching me not to abandon what hurts." Julian promised to listen before commanding to come home to respect Claire's independence and to build a future Nora would not have to fear. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Julian kissed Claire slowly. Nora clapped from Rachel's arms. The reception was held beneath strings of lights overlooking the water. Music drifted across the lawn. Nora danced on Julian's shoes. Claire stood nearby laughing. Then grief struck without warning. She saw the candles through the chapel window. She imagined Lucy at Nora's age. Dark hair, unsteady steps, a white dress. The happiness inside Claire did not disappear. It became painful. She stepped away from the reception and walked toward the shore. Julian followed but stopped several feet behind her. He waited. Claire reached back. Only then did he take her hand. "I am happy," she said. "I know. That is why it hurts." Julian stood beside her. Neither tried to solve the feeling. They watched the water until Claire could breathe again. The next morning she woke before sunrise. Julian was not in bed. Claire found him on the balcony holding Nora beneath a blanket. The Savannah River reflected the first gold light of morning. Nora saw Claire and reached for her. Claire stepped beneath the blanket with them. Julian kissed her temple. "Do you regret staying that first night?" Claire looked at him. "I regret believing it was only one night," Nora laughed. A ship horn sounded in the distance. Claire rested her head against Julian's shoulder. Some families began with promises made before an altar. Some began with blood. Theirs began with a cry no one could stop a man too frightened to ask for help, and a woman who believed her arms would remain empty forever. They had not healed because they found one another. They healed because every time fear told them to leave, they learned how to stay.